bulbs over the room. Wow, what do you think so far? Come on, it's morning. What do you think so far? Has it been productive? I heard that. You're in trouble. I already said you're in trouble. All right, so first of all, I want to make sure that we thank April. Stand up, April, wave. April's been taking care of all the logistics, so you have no idea how close she's come to pulling out her hair a few times. So we really, really appreciate everything that she's done. So if you guys make sure you take some time to thank her. And I gotta say, I am really impressed with you guys. You are a great group, and it's not just been me saying it, but I've been hearing it from other people. You guys have been digging in from when you just came in yesterday, and I am so impressed. You guys are kindred spirits, and we're all here for a common cause, and it's so fantastic to see how all of this is spreading and all of the enthusiasm. So I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you guys are doing. But it's my pleasure right now to introduce Beth Ambos. She's the Executive Director of the Council on Undergraduate Research, and one of my heroes. Beth's career as a proponent of undergraduate research began when she was an undergrad herself at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. There she had earned her AB in geology, and we won't hold it against her. We actually have some chemists in the group too, okay? Yeah, and some physicists, yes. All right. All right, so Beth ended up getting her master's and her PhD from the University of Hawaii, Manoa, in both marine geology and in geophysics, respectively. Her specialty is with explosives, and she was doing all of the setting and the retrieving of seismonic devices, so don't disagree with her, okay? Let's keep this nice. She has a lot of experience with the University of California University system on all different levels, so she can speak to your experiences as those in administration, those that have been teaching, those that have been working with students in undergraduate research. Overall, she has over 30 publications to her name, both in her own name and with other co-authors, and over 90 presentations. And I gotta say, where does this one tick in, Beth? All right, it's my pleasure to introduce Beth Ambos.
Thank you, Melanie, and it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm going to do some speaking from the podium, but y'all are going to have to do some work this morning. We're going to do a lot of pop-up breakouts and discussions, and part of that, I think, will get people's juices flowing about how to connect everything you've been doing over the last day. And wasn't that a fantastic presentation last night? That was just an amazing plenary. In fact, there are a lot of lessons learned that Sandra drew for us that are going to follow through with what we're going to do together this morning. What's interesting is the learning pieces, the learning strategies I'm going to reflect with you on for scaling up and scaffolding really are at not just the department level, but at the meta level, the institution level, and looking at culture change and looking at some of the deep issues that are either opportunities, and I always go to the opportunity space. One of my favorite expressions is run towards the light. Run towards the light, because if you focus on the barriers, you're not going to get to the really fun part, which is the opportunities. So in addition to thanking Melanie and April and Judy and Susan and all the other folks, I want a special shout out for Ellen Goldie. And Ellen, because I think we've been having some really great conversations over the last few months, and we had an opportunity to really see each other's perspectives at a hearing. Was it in October or November last year at the National Academies? And so I think that gives you an idea of the high profile that Pulse has to be invited to give that. And I was just so humbled to be able to share part of that program with Pulse and with Ellie. So we're going to do a little bit of an icebreaker, and I'm going to say just 2 minutes. I don't have a fancy timer, I'm just going to use my watch. I want us to use the 2 minutes for a pair share about the following question. And what you're going to do is talk to somebody at your table about when was your first undergraduate research experience, either as a student or as a mentor. And in retrospect, what did that experience lead to? So just take a minute or two and just talk to someone right next to you about that. Okay, we're gonna bring it back. We're gonna bring it back. I was watching all the body language. There was an intense sharing going on, and I saw a lot of people nodding. And so I want to have a show of hands. How many people discussed an experience that was a one-on-one with a faculty mentor? How many people? Okay, so the majority. So hold that thought and hold that context, because now we're going to leap into a little bit about the Council on Undergraduate Research. And I know many of you are familiar with the Council on Undergraduate Research, many of you are not, so Ellen suggested I do a little background. First of all, I am a product of the Council on Undergraduate Research. I became a member when I was an associate professor, just transitioned to be associate, so it was bright and shiny. Just had tenure at Cal State Long Beach. And I said, where can I find a community of like-minded individuals that really love this idea of working directly with undergraduate students on research? And that was Council on Undergraduate Research. At the time I joined, it was about 2,000 or 3,000 people. We have grown, I'm not going to say exponentially, but we just passed the 10,000 mark in March, and already we're up almost 500 more members between March and what is today, June 20th, 19th? Okay. So the way that CUR works is it has all kinds of institutions, public, private, faith-based, small specialty schools, and it has 12 different divisions, 10 of which are discipline-based. So there is one for biology. In fact, it is the largest division. It's a little over 1,000 members. But we have, interestingly enough, the fastest growing divisions are, does everybody want to guess what the fastest growing divisions are? I'm sorry?
Program director.
Program director? You're close. You're close. The fastest growing division is arts and humanities. And yes, we have 2 more administrative divisions, which is key to thinking about large-scale reform. Is there a place for people with more administrative roles? Yes, they have a disciplinary affiliation, but they may be doing a position that puts them in touch with resources and policy. That's really what administrators do. And yes, we have one that's at large, and it's mostly provosts, deans, research and sponsored programs folks, and we have a very fast-growing division of undergraduate research program directors. So our mission is we help anybody, like Pulse, any other group, to support and promote the high-quality undergraduate student faculty, collaborative research and scholarship effort. And that's international. So this graph really shows what I'm talking about in terms of if you track the green squares or green diamonds and the blue diamonds, that is arts and humanities and social science. And the graph on the X is year. So 12, 13, we did a census and found that this is what our numbers were for members. And then, of course, numbers are on the side there on the y-axis. So you can see that vertiginous growth of arts and humanities and social science. I bring that up always when I talk to people because when we're talking about department level reform, at some point you get into curricular discussions with colleagues across the academy, and they're going to look for those touch points for whether they can really understand where you're coming from. And what we're seeing in Kerr is those institutions where there's a lot of folks from all disciplines, I see them moving ahead in curricular reform, I'd say more quickly. So that's not meant to be a judgment. So you notice I skipped a slide on what we offer because I think most people here are aware of that. I won't belabor the fact we do advocacy on Capitol Hill. We do a lot of work actually for advocacy for NSF undergraduate programs. We do a lot of programs and services. We have a major conference coming up next week. And 2 years ago, we merged with the National Conference in Undergraduate Research. I was talking to Leroy, about NCUR. And NCUR too is growing rapidly. University of Kentucky, we had about 4,200 students, with a large growth in community college presenters, and also we're seeing a large growth in high school research. So undergraduate research is becoming a province, particularly for the junior, senior years in high school. So this is just a snapshot of a poster session, so you can get an idea of the flow and numbers of people in Kentucky. A little bit about you. Obviously, I went and looked at all our membership records for your institutions and found lovely, 70% have had some touch with Kerr, either come to an institute, had an institutional membership, or published in Kerr Quarterly, which I really recommend for all the amazing things you folks are doing. I know some of you are publishing in life sciences. Kerr is also a great publication venue. So I want to not switch gears, but sort of increase the conversation in the way that I think Ellen wanted me to do, which is talk about your accrediting body, SACS, and the quality enhancement program component of what folks go through with accreditation. And of course, is that inextricably linked to departmental reform and institution reform or what? I mean, which drives the other? That's always my question. And I was in the Western Association, WASC, and every 5 years I was an administrator I did graduate programs, I did research sponsored programs, and I was always brought in as the team to help construct the documents. So how many people here have been part of accreditation reviews in SACS? Okay. How many people, I'm not going to ask how many people enjoy it, I'm going to answer that question. But what's really interesting from a Kerr perspective, because we're all disciplines and we see the patterns across the country, is SACS is really out, I can only say that here, out in front in terms of the quality enhancement plan concept. And the fact that we see so many institutions grabbing a hold of undergraduate research as if, usually not the QEP, but one of the major QEP aligned efforts. So I just did a quick Google, just as Sandra advised us to do, just Google it, and found just a few examples. I didn't pull any of your names because I thought my purpose is to talk about things a little bit outside this group and bring that perspective in. But you recognize a lot of the names. Actually, Georgia Tech is here, and you are on this list. What I noticed is the QEPs were inaugurated over the last decade, so starting in the mid-2000s, which means a lot of them are reaching, if they had an undergraduate research part of a QEP, they're reaching the show us the impact piece. They're going to be coming back to the next 5-year review. By the way, how many of you are on 5-year review cycles or 10-year review cycles? 5 years? 10 years? Okay, how many people not sure? That's fair. But the point is that when you really only have a hiatus, in my experience, of a couple years where you're not either implementing a review or getting ready for a review. And so I'm really interested in talking to anybody who's at the getting ready for their next review after their QEP included some part of undergraduate research. So we know your landscape includes undergraduate research, not included in the previous slide, but I'll tell you from reading sample QEPs, a lot of them focused on 2 or 3 things. Setting up an undergraduate research office, which Kurt always says is absolutely a really good thing to do for your institution. Creating celebratory events for students and faculty to celebrate the research outcomes. And to scale up the immersive summer, more one-on-one model that mimics the NSF REU. So REU research experiences for undergraduates, and I know Chuck Sullivan's in the audience, I will say has been a really interesting reflector and partner with the QEP, because when I read the QEPs that include undergraduate research, a lot of what's being proposed, or had been proposed, say in 2004 or 5, really included aspects of the RU model. We're going to mentor a small group of students, and then we're going to try and grow that group and continue throughout the year. So now we come to the fork in the road, and as Yogi Berra says, when you come to the fork in the road, you take it. So when we're talking scaling up and scaffolding, yes, let's do it. But what do we need to do first? We need to do the why. Why? And I will, this is not like a mystery, but I'll give you the end purpose of the why is that, and the clue is that it's a national imperative that has now been enshrined in President Obama's strategy. Okay, so no pressure. So let's take 5 minutes and do a pair share again, but it can be more triads if people feel more comfortable that way, to talk about your why. Why at your institution you would scale up and scaffold undergraduate research. Or why are you? Maybe some of you are very far ahead. So let's take 5 minutes. And then I'm probably going to ask for help from Ellen, April, Melanie to do some, we'll do some people speaking from the tables on that. So 5 minutes. Okay, believe it or not, I know how, see, this is how we make the time pass really quickly. So April is going to respond to, we'll take the first 3 to do some discussion of what's your why in just a few sentences. What's your why? So raise your hand and April will be the curator, and she'll pick on people if nobody raises their hands. So who wants to speak first? Oh, Judith.
It's the right thing to do.
Okay, it's the Judith Dill says it's the right thing to do from James Madison. Okay, great. Who else?
April.
We came up with lots of whys. Okay, we came up with lots of whys, but one of the things that came up is that it really supports the institutional mission in terms of developing those critical thinking skills, being more engaged with students, which is going to lead to them having products that actually demonstrate their mastery of those skills, and potentially even a portfolio they can use to show employers, professional schools, and graduate schools that what they've learned.
Okay, great. And so I don't have your name. I don't have that.
Kevin.
Kevin?
From Barton College.
From Barton College. So I would say production of tangible evidence of scholarly achievement. So it's the right thing to do and tangible evidence. So the third one?
I'm Maureen from Norfolk State. It also produces scientists. It gives the student a sense of knowing that they're just not in a major. It produces a scientist. And once they feel that they have the scientist role, they see opportunity open up. And it also enhances or improves the levels of students going on to graduate.
Okay, so there was so much richness that got packed into those three comments, and I'm going to piggyback from what Maureen said, and that these 3 points here in bullets encapsulate probably 50 or 100 research-based studies that have accumulated in the last 25 years. And one thing that Currid's done, because we're a really grassroots organization, even with 10,000 plus members, is we crowdsourced a bibliography, which is available to members online, of assessment of impact of undergraduate research. And so our thinking is that you really bin the positives and the why into 3 major areas. It increases aspirations and persistence. As Maureen said, it gets that identity of the scientist and then the push to aspire to the next level. So having run a summer undergraduate research program with NSF funding where we had high school students, we had community college students, this was in geology, but it was still cool even though it was in biology. And we had 4-year students, and we tracked the aspirational with a pre and a post-test framework. And it was really interesting. The community college students at the beginning of the summer said they wanted to finish their AA degree. The post-test said, now I want to go to a bachelor's, and some of them had already checked, I want to go on for a master's or PhD. And the same for the 4-year students. Before it was, I want to get my bachelor's. And remember, these are rising sophomores and juniors that we selected. After the immersive experience, it was, I want to go into grad school. So the aspirations and the persistence, and there's a certain body of literature that's coming up through a lot of scholars, out of Sylvia Hurtado's work at Harry Higher Education Research Institute. I'd be happy to give specific references afterwards. I know I'm rushing through them. Some of the work done at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, where there's almost a sense that the research, especially early, acts as an inoculant, acts as a validation process. So even if a student in STEM, and I see Judith because she's very well versed in this literature, has a faculty member, and Sandra let us know that how many of them will tell students, you're not cut out for this. And that she's rewriting that narrative for us nationally. That's great. But if you're a student and you've had a valid undergraduate research experience early enough on, and you've done something like present it to your peers, or present it at a poster session at an end of school event, you're inoculated. If later on somebody says in an upper division course, well, you got a D on organic chem, I just don't know about that med school. You're gonna, no, I know I'm good. I need to find a way to make this work. And maybe it's finding another professor as a mentor. So there's that. And then there's the piece of the core STEM professional competencies. Ability to access the literature and read it. Ability to formulate a hypothesis and test it. Ability, just what Maureen was saying, ability to be a scientist. Those are built authentically with undergraduate research. Last but not least, and this is something I want to bring to you as Pulse fellows, leaders in your own institutions, as a core need we have for the research-based literature. We know mentorship and learning communities also are tremendous, almost process byproducts of undergraduate research, because what we're seeing is ecosystems develop on campuses. I see so many people nodding, where if you have a faculty member that's doing a field or lab-based experience, and they have some undergraduates, they will naturally mature some of the ones that have been longer in the program to be mentors. They will develop somehow, we don't know how, mentorship skills. And they may have graduate students who they also bring in as mentors. And they form a learning community. And that's a key scale-up factor, by the way. So, sorry, I skipped over a very important picture, because I'm a picture person. But this is really what we call the money shot, in a very polite way. There's two graphs I'm going to show you have, to me, tell the story in a way maybe you can make it even prettier than these. But the other major reason we're seeing all of those 3 points I brought up in the previous slide come into the fore now as essential to look at is because the research literature also shows, and I say it needs more replication. I'm thinking back, and there's probably 10 to 12 studies now accumulated, but they're showing a disproportionately positive impact of underrepresented, some groups say underserved. They can be defined that way by NSF categorization, they can be, or NIH, they can be defined that way by some institutions in terms of socioeconomic or first in the family to go to school. Doesn't matter. What we see is particularly early research in the first 2 years, but definitely by the end of the student's undergraduate, we see tremendous boosts for students' perceptions of their deep learning, what we were talking about yesterday, and their gains. And this does correlate, though this does not show it, the next slide does, to GPA, to retention, to graduation. So Ashley Finley and Tia Brown McNair at ACMU did a very nice study, and you can see there's 2 green arrows pointing to the 2 high impact practices that have the highest positive. One on the right is undergraduate research, one on the left is service learning, which often is done in the communities surrounding. I see people going, yes! And I bet you know what I'm going to say a little later in the presentation. Yes, it's a kumbaya moment. So, because I came from the Cal State system, largest baccalaureate degree granting system, 450,000 students, 23 campuses. I was at the system office so I could see patterns. I was assistant vice chancellor for research for 6 years in the system. And we had an unusual institutional researcher who was a PhD in psychology at Cal State Northridge. It's about 35,000 students, give or take 1,000 or 2. She went and did a matched study. In other words, she took attributes of students in high impact practices. She went and looked at the student records, and then she matched for attributes such as entry GPA, SAT score, community, and so forth. So that's a standard practicum when you can't do an actual control group. And what she found was on the purple is climbing upwards is Latino students with 0, 1, 2, or 3 plus high impact practices. So undergraduate research, service learning, international, under their belts by the time they are graduating. And these are 6-year graduation rates, because we've got a lot of part-time students, we don't do 4-year as a metric. What you see is you've got a 73% grad rate for Latina students with 3 plus. You compare it to not Latino, so this is white, Asian, African American, etc. You see that you still have a very high climb, but it's almost what I call the vault over effect for Latina students. You see they begin to persist at even higher levels and have even more success. So that's what the data show. So part of what this leads me to, and I am a shameless advocate, is I would pitch undergraduate research as a first among equals for high impact practices, for STEM in particular. Part of it is that it's the only high impact practice, if you look at cost issues, that has an opportunity in some cases for leveraging with federal funds, whether it's McNair Scholars, whether it's REU, whether it's Bridges to Baccalaureate. How many people have NIH RISE funding or Bridges to the Baccalaureate programs? EPSCoR states, yes. Okay, EPSCoR is doing a lot of undergraduate research funding. Kerr's worked now with 3 X4 systems, 3 X4 states. The second point is because we were talking last night that there is no institution in the country at the 4-year level that is not raising, it was Kennedy, I was talking to Kennedy about this from Alabama State. It is no institution in the country that is decreasing their research expectations for faculty. So strategies that at the 4-year level, yes, people are laughing. But undergraduate research can support that, and it can also support service. Last but not least, and this is, I think, going back to the person who raised their hand about service learning, I didn't quite catch your name. You, yeah. Amal, is that undergraduate research can be combined and can evolve with other high-impact practices. So it's a Big Tent concept. But part of going back to President Obama's agenda is that in 2012, the President's Council of Advisors in Science and Technology released the report on how to generate 1 million more STEM graduates in the near future. And undergraduate research was prominently singled out, particularly in connecting it to entry in the first and second year. And in fact, I will say Kerr has been called to give advice for bills that are coming on now for trying to see if federal funds, particularly for the research labs, more of those funds can go towards first and second year students. So I call this recommendation, advocate moving from research as a privilege to undergraduate research as a right. So now you're thinking, oh boy, how many students do I have on my campus? The president wants me to do what? Every single one? So obviously that leads you to the scaffolding that is deeply in the curriculum, and there's nothing more deeply held by faculty, and what you're all discussing is the curriculum. So the scaffolding is going to need to happen deep in the curriculum, and it's going to need to be tied to as many other parts of what faculty and students already cherish and value and the institution's resources as you can. So here's what we're seeing is across many of the institutions that are members of KER that have really moved towards an institution-wide research-based curriculum, is that they center a lot of what they're doing in the community. And this is particularly true for, I would say, more rural suburban campuses where they're often the largest employer, and or in central city cores where they're not only the largest employer, they can be a safe place, a place for a lot of community interaction already. And so we see that the first year scaffolding and scaling up and connecting first year to senior research experiences, doing it across disciplines, across the institution, and centering in on the community, and making that the central piece is emerging as the overarching paradigm. Now you have to unpack this. You can't just say, oh, okay, I love that little egg-shapey thingy, how do I go there? Because you have to unpack how many people are administrators, because I know that was part of the team structure, okay. A lot of the ways, I've been both a faculty administrator, so I'm a web foot. I have 1 foot on land and 1 in the ocean. You do need to go to the mindfulness about cost pretty quickly. And divide, I'm being serious, I'm being honest. Is it good to be honest about these things? Okay. So if you're in a position with your QEP, so I see people even rolling on the floor laughing, you definitely are putting forward proposals for QEPs that have cost implications. And part of what we see for people unpacking the scaffolding is, I'd say the most successful approach is to break down the curriculum, the summer intensive piece. Many QEPs that featured that and put it in place in the 2000s probably have a pretty good idea of what it costs to run something and how that can be scaled. Then there's the upper division curriculum. Why separate upper division? Because some of the really interesting dynamics we are seeing is partnering between 2- and 4-year institutions and regions to share research programs and to create a seamless, and I'm going to go back to Kevin, some are doing a quasi-portfolio approach to pack the 2-year college undergraduate research experience into a form that can be recognized by advisors in the 4-year. Not yet tied to courses, that's a whole other thing. And then research infused in curriculum in the lower division. As you get down that pathway, you're really seeing a decreasing cost per student for the institution. This does not necessarily translate to the time and energy cost issues. So what tools does KER have to help institutions to get here? I think we have a very good document that's totally free online. It's called Characteristics of Excellence in Undergraduate Research, and it sets out a whole, how many people have seen this document? Okay, so about a third. I really recommend it. It's on our website. Yeah, but
It's good.
it's good. But it represents about 300 faculty, primarily faculty with some administrators, crowdsourcing a document where seeking to cover all the bases and what do you need to have a really excellent undergraduate research program. And then we've been doing a lot of work with institutions with NSF funding, and we really appreciate that, on helping institutions go to the curriculum redesign piece. And in the last 3 years, KER has really been asked to step up its ability to consult on faculty recruitment, retention, and advancement and incentives tied to scaling up undergraduate research. And so I won't go through all of what's in the characteristics of excellence, and I won't talk about what's on the left-hand side. Those are some key success factors, and frankly, those are things that most institutions here are probably doing in one way or another and are reflected frequently in the QEPs. The last two are still, I'd say Pulse has a lot of ground covered and a lot of lessons to share back with practitioners on development of consistent emphasis assessment. That's something that is really needed. And better establishment of policies. When people have policies at universities, having done a lot of policy work, how many people have served on senates for faculty senates? Okay, so that's where policy really happens. And what we see is that sometimes people put policies in place and there are unintended consequences that actually mitigate against things. I'll give one example. Team teaching, ideal way to scale and scaffold. Do you have a policy to fairly apportion credit? Oh, okay, so we're really getting some laughter on that one. Okay, so you see what I mean? I mean, you have to look at the policy space and you have to make it consistent across the institution. You can't have, oh, in this college we get this assigned time and in this college we don't get any. That is not a good way to go. So because I know I'll have some folks in a breakout session, the next few minutes are really just to give you some ideas of what those topics will be and to end with sort of a pair share triad discussion with some feedback on one key question relating to one of these four. And so there are four main topics that I'll be talking about with folks this afternoon. First, and I've labeled them. Now, this is just my experience. It could be you'll say, no, I think the last one she's going to show is the easiest. But in my experience, tackling incorporating student research into undergraduate division courses, especially once you have the faculty mentored immersion piece developed. So you have more than, say, one person in a department doing research with students. For most institutions, is the easiest next step to tackle. Then, how do we integrate research across the curriculum? Now this one, how do we improve the effectiveness of faculty mentors, Part of the reason this is hard is we do not yet have a comprehensive research-based literature on the mentorship process. It's there, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. And this is Pulse's main territory, and one of the reasons I'm so excited to be learning with you, the hardest thing, which you started, and I tease Ellen about this, is if we recognize that the department is the unit of change, how do we affect that change? So how many people here would reverse this, particularly because you're in Pulse, and say, the one I have on the bottom is actually the easiest for you? It's a good thing people are here and aren't going to spend the next day. Okay, so I'm going to just suggest, because we have about 15 more minutes, is that right? Okay, we take another 5 minutes and discuss again in pair and dyads, and then we'll do the same sharing from 3 folks. The question, is research a significant part of your department's undergraduate major degree requirements at the upper division level? For community college practitioners, upper division would be construed as the core courses you're teaching that would be transferable and count towards a 4-year program. So it could be intro biology or biology methods, or if you have a division between cell and molecular and organismal, whatever transfers and is a core for a 4-year degree would be the equivalent for you. And so then, if yes, what forms? And if no, why not? So 5 minutes. Okay, one more pair share, or actually not pair share, one more rounds of people giving some examples. I think, because I want to make sure, because I know there are a lot of examples. We do 5, Ellen? I think we'll have time to do 5 tables. I think we'll have time to do 5 tables. So whoever wants to speak first about. Okay, so we're going to hear from people about the question of research in the upper division curriculum or community college in the core courses that translate to both your AA degree or to a 4-year program. And I do both. If you have yes, we're doing it, but then no, it's not quite where we want it to be, that would be good. Or if it's a total no, we're not doing it at all. We want to hear from a few people who have that experience. So let's get started and say your name and institution.
Is it on? Yeah. I'm Linda from Mercer, and we, for the last 2 days, have been discussing what the definition of novel is. Because in our 400-level courses, we have a requirement for independent research. They learn the techniques for 6 weeks, and then for 8 weeks they do independent research. But the questions they're asking are not necessarily novel. And so we have to carry it a step further and actually have them look at the literature and come up with the next step. And then our second question, which we haven't finished working on, is because of the class sizes, they're working in groups of 4. And how do we get the individuals to ask those novel questions? That's what we need to work on.
That is a great example, and I would say you're well on your way in sophistication and have a lot to share with people in the room. So who's next?
I'm just kind of like frightening people.
Yeah, right. We have a hand over here, and right.
All right. Well, we haven't really.
So we had a mixture of experiences at our table. Some people who said we have really no real research in courses, and then some where there are some courses that are using research-based techniques, but it's not really hypothesis-driven. And then a few courses where we do have good hypothesis-driven research. And I was giving some examples. I was visiting faculty at William & Mary. They have the undergraduate research QEP. And so for the courses I taught when I was visiting there, the last third of every laboratory course I taught was research-based. And all of the faculty incorporated their personal research into the courses that they were doing. And it was a great way to support faculty research too, because you could drop in the teaching budget to help keep your projects going.
Yeah.
And it worked really well, and it was really hypothesis-driven. It's not a known outcome.
And I'm going to tack on something while Ellen's finding another willing victim, is University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, because you brought up the teaching budget piece, and we have to be realistic about money. They got their students to vote a fee, very small, like $10 a student per year, from their student fees, which is separate from tuition, to go towards undergraduate research. So it's a pooled fund, and it helps support the central office, and it helps to give mini grants out to faculty student teams. So there are a couple of institutions doing that, so I thought I'd tag that on to your comment.
Jim Stevens from State University. We have a course in our catalog called Research in Biology. And we're looking towards revamping that course so that the majority of our students will be able to take it, and they would have some research experiences on the campus, as well as during the summers at selected universities or companies that would meet our requirements for that particular course.
That's a great example. Really great to see that. Two others. We have time for two others.
Anybody over there? Can I not make them run away all the way? Yes.
I'm Valerie Burnett. I'm with Newberry College. We also have a variety of experiences. We have a biochemist here, so he's technically in the chemistry division. And I'm in the biology division. They have through ACS some additional kind of funding avenues that they can do so that they can do some research things that we can't necessarily do, especially since biology is so broad. There's not some central type of group like ACS that we can work with. Our students have to do an experiential learning component. It's a capstone kind of thing. So they have to do that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be primary research, although we encourage that. But we have our students who are education, secondary education, but in some kind of STEM discipline. Instead of doing education with the STEM discipline on the side, we make them do the STEM discipline as their major, and then it becomes a concentration then in secondary education. So like our biology students who are secondary ed, they are required to do something called investigative biology, where they actually do spend, kind of similar to what she was talking about, with 6 weeks where they're learning techniques and stats and that kind of thing, and then they have to do a hypothesis-driven type of experiment that they have to come up with on their own, and we find a mentor either outside of our institution or somewhere in our institution. Actually, he mentored one of my students this spring, who is actually looking at genetically modified corn and trying to see if these things that are so-called organic really or have some genetically modified components to it. So they did some really interesting things, and it allowed him to actually get some things he can utilize that came out of the teaching budget that he can now continue using. But those students is great because a lot of them will only get a 4-year degree and they don't go on to then do undergraduate research. So they are forced to actually do this class. They have to do it. A lot of our other students, we put them in internships, and we were just talking about trying to get things that were more research-driven internships.
Thanks. Ellen, I think we have time for one more, and then I'm going to wrap it up. Because
As I walk, I'm going to bring your attention. I just did a site visit to Grinnell College, and their introductory course is based on every individual faculty member's primary research. And so it is a fully immersed course of investigating a topic within the area of the professor's interest. So rather than the student having come up with something completely novel, the professor's interests actually set the stage for what's possible. And that is the kind of model that my institution has been working with as well, except we don't have, we're a little more prescriptive of what the research might be in that introductory course. Who else might want to? Okay. Maybe I just took the stage for the last one.
Okay, so we'll have more informal conversations throughout the day. I want to close with what would the future look like for an institution and department that has adopted a research-based curriculum, and what I would call one of the needs to go there, which we haven't had time to discuss, is building a faculty research team approach. That is very hard to do, but it's a really good thing to do. And one of my hero departments from my own former institution, Cal State, is Cal State Dominguez Hills. Cal State Dominguez Hills is not a highly resourced institution. It is drawing a student body that's very diverse socioeconomically, racially, ethnically, has working adults primarily, often working 2 or 3 jobs. And yet you have a department like anthropology, and what they've done, and it takes a visionary set of faculty to do it, takes a core group of 2 or 3, is they developed a research-based curriculum, and they developed shared research programs among the faculty that were synergistic with the learning experiences they put into the courses. And the hiring documents, I talked to the chair, the hiring letters to the faculty say, you are expected to work as part of a team, and your research interfingers with this person's, and this person's. And one of the signs that it's a very robust construct is we see a lot of proliferation of research journals, and the Anthro department at Dominguez has one for students to publish their own research. I want to close with a shameless plug for some publications. Just maybe browse our website. Everybody that I've talked to that has a need for a particular curve publication and picks it up, finds nuggets of really good advice. And I'd say the one on the right, which is our newest, I really recommend to this group, Faculty Support and Undergraduate Research, Innovations in Faculty, Role Definition, Workload and Reward, because there's a wealth of ideas here on how to give credit, whether it's release time, lab resource allocations, setting up banking systems for credit, you name it. A lot of it is in this document. So I want to thank everybody for this morning. We're ending right on time, and thank the entire Pulse team, and I feel really humbled and grateful to be here with you today. Thank you.